Oh, let's do
All right,
it.
everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Expert with the Martin Eiden team. This week it is special permanent guest star Whit Prouty as the guest star host for it. Whit's going to introduce Matthew Roseman, and we'll take it from there. So, Whit, all you.
So, real estate guys and topics of real estate and stuff. No, not this time. Let's go something different. How about mobile gaming and video games? So today,
That's awesome.
Yeah, just something out of left field. But I figured, you know what?
Games are fun.
Games are fun. What a great topic to discuss. Probably not something that a lot of people know about. And so today, my guest is Mr. Matthew Roseman. He is the Director of Product at Jam City, which is a video game developer based in Los Angeles. So without further ado, Matthew, how about you tell us a little bit about you, maybe your background, a little personal story, and maybe how you ended up getting into games.
Well, thanks for inviting me on the show. I've watched a couple of your episodes. Exciting to be here. I felt like I had to get away from my gaming. You know, I took off my t-shirt, I put a nice power shirt on.
Yeah, I'm surprised there's not like a huge big screen TV behind you with.
This is my office. my video game space is in a different part of the house. 10 o'clock is a little early for us in the gaming world. It's
thank you.
Sometimes this will be my first meeting of the day for sure. So thank you for that. Definitely a nice change of pace for me. Sorry, say it again, Martin.
I said always happy to be of help in that regard.
Oh yeah, exactly. So background. So I grew up in New York City, and right after college was working on a trading floor actually. So I thought I was gonna, go be a sales trader, and I did that for 3 years, and I hated it. I was sort of the guy that on like Thursday mornings when the trailers would drop on movies, people would come to my desk and be like, "Hey, are any good new trailers out?" Like video game trailers would drop on Tuesdays. So it'd be like, "Hey, any new video games that we should be playing?" And I was just always the dude that was loving to talk about entertainment and games. And I decided after, 3 years doing that, this is back like 2008 when the sort of financial crisis sort of took apart that industry, and like
sort of.
Yeah, it felt like a good time to explore things that I was actually
our industry as well.
Yeah, so I decided to move to LA. I got a one-way ticket to LA, and at the time, Entourage, if you guys remember, Entourage was like,
yeah, absolutely,
great show.
My formative years were watching that show, so I was always like, oh man, I'm gonna go be Ari. I'm gonna go work in the entertainment business, see what I can sort of do in the sort of where finance meets entertainment. And I moved out to LA, and I worked in a mailroom. And so that was a very different change, going from like trading floor at 6 a.m. to mailroom at 7 a.m, and you're delivering people's mail. And that was my first experience in the entertainment world. And that parlayed into an opportunity to work for an entrepreneur that was basically a guy by the name of Peter Chernin, who was starting and investing in companies that were really disrupting the world of technology and media. So where, the world of, Netflix and YouTube was just starting to really change how people experience different types of media. And games was one of the things we looked at often, and spending a couple years working with entrepreneurs and thinking about like starting businesses in that space just got me really excited about wanting to go be and work in one of those environments, as opposed to sort of sitting on the side of, oh, I think mobile games is a great investment. Here's some money and let's check in, in a couple months or a couple years and see how it goes. I really wanted to sort of learn how to operate and be part of that world. And so the natural progression for me was to go back to school. I went to business school, and I was at the time targeting this concept of product management, which was a fairly new sort of discipline that was hitting lots of different areas of entertainment, whether it was in the games businesses or even in sort of some technology companies. And I was targeting product, and games was something that I was always really excited about. I'd grown up playing games. I remember playing Zelda with my dad, like, in the original Nintendo when I was like 6 or 5. And I've just always been into games. And so, but I never thought that I would actually make games or work in games. It sort of happened in this way where I wanted to do product and I wanted to stay with something that was really growing mobile at the time. Everybody had these new, iPhones that were just changing how people experience
Right.
media. And I met a guy from Warner Brothers that who was an alumni of my business school, who was helping that company take their console gaming business into the world of mobile. And so if you guys are familiar, you have these big consoles with the discs, and you spend 4 or 5 years making those games, and they release them into the world, and you pay $60 for the game, and so they move on to the next game. That world was changing very quickly into a world where you might spend a year or two making a game, give it out to free to everybody who can now play on their console that's in their pocket, as opposed to this $200 thing you had to go buy and then buy the discs. And so Warner Brothers was looking to really invest and start their business in that part of the world. And so I started with them and spent almost 5 years with them, helping bring their console games to the mobile world. So Mortal Kombat was a big game that I worked on that we brought to Injustice and a couple other games. And
that was my son's favorite game for a number of years, was Injustice.
Yeah, Injustice, great game. I got to work with Superman and Batman and Harry Potter, and Warner Brothers just had this amazing plethora of brands that you got to work with that were bringing to games. And that's sort of where I got my start in games. And, fast forward almost 10 years later, I'm still doing it.
Very cool. So tell us then a little bit more about your specific role in the industry. You're the product manager for Jam City. So tell us about what do you do? How's it fit into the broader scope of developing?
Yeah. So product managers, my mom asks me this question all the time, and I feel like I explain it over and over again, and she still doesn't really understand.
Yeah, moms are the worst on that with explaining careers. Side note.
So I have, so product is this role that, forces you to wear a lot of different hats. And, I sort of liken it to, actually, I just bought a house, and I've been looking at, doing some work on the house, and I've been meeting these general contractors. And so the general contractor, they have an architect that does the design, and they have the people that are painting the house, and they have sort of all the different disciplines sort of bubble up into, let's call it the general contractor. Is that a good way to explain the GC role? I don't know if that's.
I like it. Yeah.
I like that. It's a good analogy.
So that's sort of what the product manager is. I'm probably the least talented person on my team. I've got designers who are, literally designing levels, or they're designing different systems in the game, and they're sort of have gone to school and become experts in how to make a game feel good, how to make it sort of not feel too difficult at times, not feel too easy at times, and sort of bring you along this path to have an enjoyable experience. You've got the artists that are sort of creating these beautiful environments. You've got sort of the engineers that are literally in the code and developing the actual sort of code base for the game. And, I'm sort of the business person in the room that's like, oh, that's really cool. And, I think we should do this. I mean, it's a little more technical than that. I mean, I think that the most fun part of my job is that I get to really lean into all these different disciplines, and I'm not an expert in any one of them. But given the state of a game, and mobile games sort of exist in this world where there's no end to the game. It's always sort of, what are you building next and why? And so you often spend a lot of your time looking sort of 3 to 6 months out, and you're thinking, okay, what features should we be bringing to the game? And you're helping look across the sort of genres and across the landscape of games that exist, and saying, oh, this game's doing that, that's really interesting. This game's doing that, that's really interesting. We have this need in our game. Let's say I want to get people to play an extra time a day, or maybe come back 2 or 3 times a day. What features are out there that we should be thinking about building to help execute on that vision?
There's a real psychology to that. I just want to interrupt because there's a whole thing about, this is an entertainment that you want to then continue to entertain your customer and pull them along and hold their interest.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the biggest difference between the console mentality and the mobile game world is, you ship a console game and that's it, right? And the world is changing a little
Right.
bit where you now have updates that you can get. But with a mobile game, there are games that have been in operation, top grossing games for 10 years now. And it's not about releasing the next game or a sequel. It's about what's the next feature that we want to bring to the game. So, hey, the game doesn't have any competitive elements. Let's create clubs where you're joining with different players in the game system to play together. Or let's create some sort of social mechanism where you're sort of working with other people as opposed to against other people. And there are just a lot of different ways to think about changing the experience of the game to make it sort of last forever, which is part of the challenge. Is you've got all these new games that come in, you have to keep your audience. So the product manager is sort of looking at the world and deciding where the team should be investing their time. And usually it's aligned with certain goals, like increasing what they call retention, which is one of the core metrics is, can I get people to retain, stay 30 days into the game, stay 60 days into the game, stay 300 days into the game. And so if you think about your game and divide it into the populations that exist, you've got your new players, you've got your people that have been are not so new anymore. Maybe they're 60, 90 days in. And then you've got your people that have been there for years and years. You're often looking at where should I be working and developing features? Should I be working on a feature for the people that are sort of at the tail end? Should I be working on a feature that's really focused on the new user experience? And so that's sort of the product manager's job, is to help guide the whole team towards these outcomes.
So you look at a lot of data then, and then try to figure out, okay, here's all this data. What's working, what's not working, let's make different choices here. And then you really do need to kind of be creative as far as what's going to keep them involved, but you do get to send it out there, see what the data says to you, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. There's sort of this, I think the product manager role has evolved the game space in that it looks at making games from two sides. You have the art side of, we want to make this game beautiful and feel good and exciting and give people that adventure. And then you have the science side of, hey, if I built it in the most simple way, if this house were red in the game or it was blue, does the red one get people to stay longer versus the blue one? And that's a very simple example, but the idea can be extrapolated across lots of different ways of looking at how to improve your game. And so the concept of A/B testing, are you guys familiar with this concept where group A gets one experience, group B gets another experience, and then we sort of see what happens over a month and then say, man, group A really did a lot better. Let's lean into that direction. So you often use, when you're not sure of something, you'll use that methodology to help sort of decide what we should be doing. So there's been a lot of influence from the data perspective into product management and into game development. So they call it sort of data-driven development, where in the past it was sort of, oh man, this feels really good. Let's ship it. Now it's, oh man, we think this is really good, but before we expose 100% of our audience to this new feature, maybe we should just take 10% of them and see what happens over a month. So we're not destroying, or let's say it does something bad, which often happens. There's a lot of, and that's sort of where the finance background, the analytical thinking definitely helps me as a product manager. But there are different kinds of product managers. Some product managers, I think, are more on the data side and more sort of apt to explore that. And then there are some product managers that are more on sort of the design side and looking at the market and they're very talented at saying, hey, that feature is great, let's try that. But I think you need both.
That makes sense. I wanted just to share one thing. It was probably around 2010, so just kind of when these things first came out, and I came across this how to care for your horse game on your phone, which is probably designed for teenage girls and me, and and you had to feed the horse intermittently throughout the day. Sure. You had to muck out the stall, and I was addicted to it. I left meetings to go take care of my horse.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what they can do with that.
Yeah.
And then
dark side.
Go ahead.
Sure.
All right. But see, okay, that's how you get hooked, right? So this is a business. So talk to us about how do these, because these are free games, correct? I mean, that's the idea.
How do they make
Turn out
money?
the crack.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the number one question that I get is, people don't understand. So, I play this game. I've never paid a dime. How is it that, you've got a team of 40 people sort of, round the clock supported by that? And the interesting thing is that it's about the business model and how it's sort of structured. So you have basically 95% of the people that download these games pay nothing. And you're making 100% of your revenue off of the 2 to 5% of people that are willing to sort of invest in the experience. And, that's sort of the challenge when you're designing these games is, there are certain people that, and there are a lot of ways to tap into this. And we sort of used some psychology to sort of think about, okay, you could log into the game 100 times a day and wait till the timer's done to get whatever you're invested in getting. And for a free player, they're willing to go and do that and spend the time to do that. And then there are people that are like, look, for $1, I'd rather just sort of skip that and get the thing right now. People want things now. They don't want to wait.
Instantaneous gratification.
Yeah, exactly. Instant gratification, is one of the sort of motifs for how to sort of design for monetization. And so, you focus on pulling some of those levers that allow your sort of players that don't have the time or want to invest or don't mind sort of spending $1 here and there. When you think about it, me growing up, going to an arcade and spending quarters in the arcade machine, it's not like we're like, oh, that's bad. I spent $5 at the arcade today.
Right.
And I view it as a very similar mechanism. And some of these games through that model are making over $100 million a month. It's crazy.
Wow. And that was one thing and I'm sure you were going to talk about it with, but I wanted to touch base. It's for some reason, and again, I'm not in the gaming world, but it seems like most people don't know that it's a bigger business than the movie industry.
Oh yeah.
And can you touch base on a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
you're a mind reader because guess
was
what?
that your next question?
Our next question was, talk to us about the gaming industry size, maybe some trends.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Some of the mind-blowing stuff with games when I tell people some of these stats. So you mentioned, the film industry. I mean, the gaming industry is almost 5x what the worldwide global box office does. And about half of that. So the gaming business overall, call it about $200 billion as of now, somewhere around there. The global box office taps out around 50. And over half of that is mobile. And so which is crazy in itself that over half of it is now mobile. But if you look back to 2010, mobile was maybe less than $1 billion in revenue. So you've gone from sort of $500 million, $800 million in 2010 to 100 plus million 10 years later, while all these other businesses have the box office has sort of stayed relatively flat over the last 10 years. It's actually probably declining now. The TV world certainly has gotten a little better, but has been very flat over the last 5 years. Music is, probably 1/10 of what games are at this point. And the mobile portion of that is what's driven 100% of the growth in that industry. And it's harps back to what I was saying about, the barriers to entry in the gaming world 10 years ago were very high, right? You had to have a $200 console, and then to have 10 games, that would cost you $600.
Right.
So you had to sort of pick which games you wanted to play. You couldn't sort of have them all. Now you've got, in your pocket, for free, often cases, this powerful computer that has access to millions of games, and they're free, all of them. And so you now have this ability, and publishers have this ability to basically give people the means to pick which game they want to play, and that's what's allowed it to scale significantly.
Wow. So where do you see the trends going as far as gaming? What were games like, or maybe like, what were the content of games to begin with? Where have they come presently, and where do you think they're headed towards?
Yeah, so I mean, when mobile first started, a lot of the business model was paid games, actually. So the free to play is something that has evolved. It used to be that in 2010, most of that revenue was from people paying $2 for a game that they would just keep on their phone. And there was never any updates or anything like that. And so that was, 80-90% of the business. And that sort of has flipped to 99% of the business probably is now all free to play. And so that shift has already happened. I think that in terms of like core trends in mobile versus sort of general, I'll first sort of talk mobile. One of the interesting things that I think is going to happen is as you have this, you can now operate in this world where, the barriers to entry used to be very, very low for mobile. You could in your backyard, garage, build a mobile game, put it on the app store, and boom, you're potentially making money. Now, because there are so many games, and because there are so many players that are spending a lot of money on acquisition, the ads that you sort of see on Facebook and whatnot, it's become very hard to be seen in the gaming space. And so the top 10 games have been the top 10 games for a long time. You don't have a lot of new entrants into that space, largely because it's very hard for newcomers to disrupt that. And so I think what's happened is, as a result of that, a lot of publishers that are on the smaller side have not been able to keep up with some of the big players that have some of these massive games. And so there's been a ton of consolidation. I think there will continue to be a lot more consolidation as sort of the industry evolves, where you will have, instead of 100 or 50 sort of big publishers, it'll come to a much smaller number of publishers with them all sort of purchasing each other. And you already have good examples of that. I mean, Zynga, which has been around for a while, purchased this company called Peak Games for almost $2 billion last year, which is a pretty big, number for a small, a mobile gaming company. And you've got valuations for other gaming companies. Gopley, a company I used to work at, just got valued at over $3 billion. And so the good publishers are getting bigger, and it's getting a lot harder to compete. And then on the genre side of things, the other thing I think is happening already is, for the last 10 years, you have people that downloaded Candy Crush 10 years ago. That game still exists now, but a lot of the features in that game are way more core than when the game first launched. And we've sort of trained people. I mean, when I say core,
what do you mean by core?
So I probably should explain that. So when you think of the landscape of genre, you have sort of super casual games like, here's my horse and I feed it and and whatnot, right? And then you've got like these very complicated games where you're sort of doing competitive things, where you have to build your team and you have to look at the stats of each character and you have to upgrade each character's stats so that your team can get better. And it's just, by core, I mean the amount of sort of design and the amount of sort of layers of difficulty in explaining this to someone and understanding how to play it. There's a pretty wide range. And so one of the things you're noticing is that people that have been working on these very casual games and playing these very casual games, they sort of get that at a certain point. It becomes, the basics of the game become very, very, they're used to it and they want more complexity. And so you're seeing a lot of these casual games start to borrow core systems from more core games because the audience is ready for a more core experience. And so I do think that you're getting, people like my mother who will play, basic Candy Crush games. They'll start putting systems into those games that will allow to have those players last longer because they're just more highly designed games. And so I do think you're going to see sort of borrowing of core genres and putting into the casual space. Ads is another thing that I think is going to happen in the space. We talked about the monetization model. One of the things that I didn't mention is that, for the 95% that are not paying, it's become a lot more easy to use ads to monetize off those players. So now you can put into a game and say, look, I know the 5% of people that are going to pay, that's great, but can I get the 95%? Can I get some money out of the 95% that are left? And we can use the advertising world to do that. There's a lot of different options and ways to sort of leverage that. So I think ad monetization is something that's going to be becoming a lot more mainstream.
So you're building essentially ads like into the game.
Exactly.
As well too. So, whatever, you've got to go to 7.
Yeah, I want an extra life.
Whatever.
Oh, watch this ad for 20 seconds and you get an extra life. So the idea is that the softer way of doing that is give players something out of the experience. The harder way of doing it is, hey, here's a good break. Let me show you a commercial. And you have to watch.
Got
and
it.
that sort of
Can
tends
I?
to be the bad way of monetizing on ads.
Sorry for interrupting again, Whit.
No, no.
And Whit is awesome. He always has like a ton of questions lined out. Would you? But I feel like talking to you like a conversation. So,
Please.
would you mind spending a few minutes doing a case study a little bit with Fortnite, because that seems like the big game and that's hyper successful, and everybody knows about it. And then you can add your own thoughts to it as well.
Yeah, no, I mean,
As you smiled and shake your head.
Yeah, I was gonna get there.
God, I hope he wasn't gonna say Fortnite.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. I don't have kids, and I'm sort of this age group that like I don't understand Fortnite really. Like, on the phone, it's a game that I sort of want a controller for, right? And the kids these days, like, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, you should be able to do this on your phone. So I think what's interesting about that game is really the esports angle of that. And esports is something that I was going to mention as like one of the really interesting trends that I think people should be paying attention to is
it's big, huge money. And these players are making huge sums.
It's crazy. It's crazy. The influencers on YouTube, Ninja and PewDiePie, they're making millions of dollars a year off of being professional gamers.
Right.
When you take that into context of NFL ratings and MLB and basketball, they're all sort of going down because kids don't watch regular sports on TV anymore. They're all watching these sort of live stream tournaments, and they're all watching sort of their favorite gamers play on YouTube and Twitch. And it's a fascinating trend that I haven't spent a lot of time working in that world. I have colleagues that sort of work in the esports community, and it's fascinating to see the growth there. And it's something I definitely think is worth paying attention to. I mean, you can really, there are professional game teams now where they recruit gamers to be part of these professional teams. There are investors that are sort of investing in these teams themselves. I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot of really interesting things happen there.
Wow, that's fantastic. So obviously this is a lighter conversation in one sense. And part of it is so COVID, the serious part of the nature. Talk to us.
Yeah, look, I mean, games have been a great thing in that environment. You're stuck at home. You sort of have to live your routine in sort of a little bit of a different way. And for gaming companies to be able to provide an outlet for people is something that I think has been really great for the game companies and for people themselves. I mean, we get reviews and customer service tickets all the time of people thanking us that, this has really been a tough spread of months. And I really value that 30 minutes that I can spend a day sort of losing myself in your game. And so it's been great for us to be able to provide that experience to our players. And I think that's really important to us. We have been doing things like, oh, here's some extra energy for the weekend, energy being sort of like the quarters you put in the machine kind of thing, because we want players to be coming back, and we don't want to be taking advantage of players in this time where they're sort of stuck. And so it's been an excellent outlet. And I'm not going to say that it hasn't helped the game industry. I mean, I think the gaming business will probably be up, at least 20% this year, just due to the fact that people have been at home with not much to do.
Okay, real fast, because they want in. This world is really cool. How do they find your job or one of those other jobs in this gaming industry, this exciting world?
Yeah. I mean, the 2 cents there is, I think there are many different ways to get into the gaming world. I mean, for myself, someone that has sort of an analytical brain and really likes solving problems, that likes games, but, never thought they could actually build games. I mean, those are the kind of people that we hire all the time. People that sort of, have the mindset to want to solve problems and can sort of put that capacity into the lens of making a game better, making a game experience better. So, I oftentimes joke that, I could be sort of working at Amazon on like the sort of diaper page of that sort of Amazon thing. And I would be doing a lot of similar things like, oh, what happens if we sort of did this deal here? And what happens if we put this image over there? And hey, how do we get new users to come into this page? And so the skill set, I think, is for at least the product perspective, is very transferable to a lot of different industries. And then on the developer side, there's a lot of schools where you can go become sort of a design master or an art engineer and sort of start your way up in that world of maybe you want to sort of be usually what happens if you're new to the gaming business is you come in as a QA person and you're on the team and you're the ones testing all the games. And then you sort of graduate from being sort of a tester to someone that's a producer. Now you're sort of helping align schedules and working with the art team and the design team and the engineers.
So there are people who are paid to play games
and
test them.
Huge.
I love that.
Yeah, it's one of the
we're in the wrong business with.
The most fun people I work with are the testers because they just love games and they're just there it's their outlet. And so to get paid to do what they love is extremely satisfying to watch.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I could talk to you for a lot longer. I have so many more questions, but we're at the end of our time and we do stick with it. So our guest today, Matthew Roseman of Jam City, Director of Product. Thank you so much for your time, Matthew. It's really been an enjoyable and very quick half hour.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. Hold on.